Good morning. The meeting will come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Good morning. Director Schenk? Here. Vice Chair Richards? Director Rossi? Here. Director Curtin? Here. Director Paskett? Director Lowenthal? Director Camacho?
Here.
Director Miller?
Here.
Senator Bell? Assembly Member Arambula? Chair Richard?
Thank you. Ms. Miller, I'm sorry, did you want to say something? They can't hear?
She said say here.
Here. You know, I'm wondering whether MWD actually did vote for the tunnels, because I can't hear a thing that's going on up here. But anyway, all right. Ms. Miller, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Flag being over.
Yes, please stand, remove your hats. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start on the agenda, I'd like to do two things this morning. First of all, I'd like to give people a sense of how this meeting is structured today. It's slightly different than what we've done in the past. As noted on the agenda, there are 2 public comment sessions for today's meeting, and we did this to give the public appropriate opportunities to address different subjects. The first public comment session will take place at the beginning of the meeting, and it'll be limited to comments on the 3 action items that are on the board agenda today. And that's the approval of the March meeting minutes, the item to consider adjusting the construction package 1 third-party utility provisional sums, and the third item is amending a legal services agreement with Caltrans. So if you wish to comment during the first public comment session, you should have filled out a white comment card. We'll then move on to the staff presentation and board deliberation on those agenda items. Following the action items, we'll move on to 2 informational staff reports. One relates to the schedule for the environmental work and the decisions on an alignment for the high-speed rail line through Southern California. That's of interest to a number of people in this community. And the second is a report on the draft 2018 business plan. Now, the draft plan is out. We are required by law to hold at least 1 public hearing on the draft plan. We've already held 1 public hearing in Northern California. We felt that it would be beneficial to the public to afford them an opportunity to have a public hearing on it here in Southern California. So those 2 items, the Southern California alignment schedule and the draft 2018 business plan, will be considered in the informational staff reports. If you have comments on those 2 informational items, the alignment schedule or the draft business plan, if you haven't done so already, please fill out a green comment card and present it to our authority staff. If you're viewing the meeting from the overflow room, which I think is probably not the case here, and have submitted a comment card, please be advised that the feed of the meeting is slightly delayed. I'll be calling speakers 3 at a time, so come to the main room the first time your name is called. By holding the public comment on these items after they were presented, we wanted to provide the public with the benefit of the staff presentations to help inform your comments before us today. And our intent and hope is that this particular approach will be more conducive to full public participation. So thank you for your patience with that. Before I do turn to the first items on the agenda of the action items, there's one other thing that I'd like to do, and it involves the recognition of an extraordinary individual who played a not well-known but actually very significant role in the furtherance of the California high-speed rail program. Many of you may know that Nancy McFadden, who served effectively as the Chief of Staff to Governor Brown, passed away due to cancer a few weeks ago. There have been many, many tributes to Ms. McFadden including an obituary in the New York Times, the nation's newspaper of record, and that is really quite an accomplishment for someone who was not herself an elected official. She has been instrumental in many, many of the legislative and other successes of the administration in the last 7 years, including the water bond issue that was very important for all of California, including the extension of cap and trade. And early on, when Governor Brown was first elected, he asked her, along with his wife, to review the California high-speed rail program and to help him determine what position he wanted to take on it, whether he wanted to listen to the entreaties of some people to move away from the program or to get fully behind it. And at that time, I spent a lot of time with Ms. McFadden. We had known each other through previous professional associations. She was always brilliant, diligent, had a huge heart, was always there for any friend in need, and was really one of the most extraordinary people that I've ever met. And I would just say she exemplified the commitment to public service. She spent most of her life in the public sector, significant period of time in the public sector, and she exemplified that sense of sacrifice and calling. So I'm going to ask that we adjourn today's meeting in memory of Nancy E. McFadden. And I'd like to just take a moment. Several of my colleagues were very important in her life, and I'd like to turn first to Director Lynn Shank, who brought Ms. McFadden to California. And Lynn, if you wanted to add a few words, please.
I would like to.
There it is, thank you. She was much more technologically apt than I. Dan, thank you. It was a beautiful tribute to a wonderful person. When I was Chief of Staff to Governor Davis, the Clinton administration was coming to an end, and I joked with the governor, I said, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. to go talent shopping. And there were so many very bright public policy people that were coming out of the Clinton administration, and I interviewed a number of them, including Nancy, who just was remarkable in every way as a brilliant strategist, as a understanding of the human condition, as a warm and charming person. And she wanted to come back to California. She was a Californian. And we were able to agree that she would come into the governor's office. She took ill the first time during her tenure with us, but came back, beat her disease, came back, and I made her the Deputy Chief of Staff, and she was literally my right arm, the governor's right arm in the energy crisis, with the then high-speed rail bill that was being carried by then Senator Jim Costa. We just could not have, I can't imagine what those years would have been like without Nancy, and she was a dear friend, thoughtful. We had our difference of opinion on a number of occasions. She did it respectfully, with, as I say, with charm, with dignity, and I will be among those who will miss her dearly.
Thank you, Ms. Shank. Nancy Miller had a long personal friendship with Ms. McFadden. Director Miller.
Thank you, Dan. It's hard for me to even look at these pictures of her in front of us, but for those of you in the audience that didn't know this woman, she was a remarkable public servant, someone who I met, I kind of bookend Lynn. We were on opposite sides of an issue for many years when she worked at PG&E. Fast friends, and she would just love the fact that people are involved in public service. You're here today to talk about an issue that was something that she was very close to her heart, but she understood the challenges of it. She was very pragmatic and realistic about her approach to government, and she was also one of these people that you would not hear a lot about her, even though she championed most of the major issues that our current governor championed, and really she was, I think, the driving force in many instances of accomplishing a lot of those issues. So I thank you, Dan, for honoring her today.
Well, thank you. A number of us dealt with her in many different capacities, and she touched a lot of lives. So, Nancy, we'll miss you. Thank you. We'll move now to our agenda, public comment on session 1, and I'm going to take the speakers in the order that we have received these. So the first 3 speakers will be the incomparable Art Leahy from Metrolink, followed by Javed Owens and Trini Jimenez.
Thank you and welcome. I've never been called incomparable before.
You have been called a number of things.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Usually multisyllabic, but congratulations to Brian, having taken on the new role, and best of luck. I want to make a few personal observations about this place, about Los Angeles, where I grew up, and then talk about the high-speed rail project just a minute. I became a bus operator for Metro back in 1971, and I worked a line that would terminate at Union Station, right out here. And I would go inside the station. I'm 22 years old, use the restroom. So I go inside, and I'm where the 2 grand halls meet. And I would stand there and look at how beautiful it was. There were 2 people in the building, me and one Amtrak guy selling tickets. The place is empty. There wasn't a newspaper rack in there. Today, it's 80,000 people a day go through there. Los Angeles is a different place than it was back then. I'm looking forward to working with high-speed rail as you come further south. I think the future is bright for all the services that we all provide and will provide, and I look forward to making sure that we coordinate things along the corridor, which we're going to be sharing with you in the future. You know, I appreciate what's been done on the draft business plan regarding Southern California. You know, I like to tell people that you know, half the population of the state lives south of Ventura Boulevard. This is the center of the state. It's the center of the Metrolink system, and it will be the center of the high-speed system when you get down here. Now, I know it's not the geographic center, but it will be the spiritual center, because there's a lot of passengers down here who don't have room on the freeways because the freeways are done. We are working hard on the SCORE program, the Southern California Optimized Rail Expansion Program. We look forward to working with you. As I said, the freeways here are fixed, so we have growing population, which is spreading out. Trip lengths are getting longer, and the freeways are done. There won't be any more widening. I do want to just note that one more story about Los Angeles. This is a true story. During the Civil War, the government sent troops down, federal troops down from San Francisco. They were stationed across the street in the Pueblo. And the reason they were there is they were fearful that Los Angeles and Southern California would secede from the Union and join the South, or they even discussed a new country called Pacifica. I want to reassure you that all of this trouble was not the result of the high-speed rail program. It had nothing to do with that. Welcome again to Los Angeles and Southern California. We look forward to working with you in the coming years, and Brian, best of luck. Thank you.
And I don't usually comment on speakers because it's your time to comment, but there was a serious omission in your remarks, Mr. Leahy, because you left out the pivotal role you had in the transformation of LA Union Station. So we should recognize that.
Oh, actually, thank you. And one more comment on that. People are griping about the high-speed rail project and how long it's going to take. From my personal perspective, the first time I worked on a rail project was in 1976. We were trying to get the Ford administration to approve a grant. I was a COO at Metro when we opened up the Blue Line, and in '93 the Red Line. I was CEO later on when we opened the Expo Line. So after all those decades, we're still working on it, just like you guys will be. So take heart.
Thank you, Art. Javed Owens, did I pronounce your first name correctly? And you'll be followed by Trini Jimenez and Mike Murphy.
Good afternoon, Chair and Directors. My name is Jeanette Owens, Senior Executive Officer here at Metro Regional Rail. We want to welcome you here in Southern California. We love having you here. We hope you can be here more often. With that being said, we would like to thank you for your investment of the Proposition 1A bookend funds to the Rosecrans Marquardt grade separation and the Link Union Station project. We want to stress that these early infrastructure investments to California, from the California High-Speed Rail to these projects provide immediate and much-needed improvements to our existing passenger rail and freight services while accommodating the future high-speed rail. High-speed rail authority has been a great partner with Metro, the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Rail and the Santa Fe Springs, as well as with MetroLink Southern California Regional Rail and the LoSan. These improvements along this corridor, especially on the Los Angeles to Anaheim corridor, where it is the second busiest rail corridor, is important to us. And we welcome the opportunity to work with high-speed rail for future investments here in Southern California to our existing rail service. I apologize if I broke a little protocol in mentioning some of the second line item on the second session, but I thought it was important, especially since these are vital improvements to Southern California.
We'll figure out your penalty later. I don't know. Thank you very much for your comments. Trini Jimenez, followed by Mike Murphy, and then Michael Behan.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and directors. My name is Trini Jimenez. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the BNSF Railway Company here in Southern California. And I'm here to voice our support in working with Metro, MetroLink, and High-Speed Rail in going forward with much of our joint urban corridor work. As mentioned, the Rosecrans-Marquardt improvement is of importance to us as well. And we firmly believe that working together with all of the relevant agencies involved as a team going forward, we will certainly accomplish much more than we could individually. So I just want to thank you for working with us, and we also look forward to partnering with all of you moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Mike Murphy from the city of Santa Clarita, followed by Michael Behan. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, my remarks are designed for item number 4, so if I could defer my comments until that time, it'd be appreciated.
That's, yes, that's fine, sir. I'll recycle your card there. Okay. Michael Behan, City of Palmdale, and he'll be followed by Kome Ajize.
Good morning. I might fall in that same category, Mr. Chairman, for item 4, but what do you suggest? I can go now, though.
You guys are all a bunch of reprobates. Everybody's in the wrong. No, it's fine.
We're rebels. Good morning, Michael Behan from the City of Palmdale, Department of Public Works. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming to Los Angeles for your board meeting. It means a lot to us. We appreciate it. So for this morning, it took me 3 hours to get here from Palmdale, from door to door, and it wasn't fun. I can tell you that. And right now in the Antelope Valley between Palmdale, Lancaster, and unincorporated LA County in the area, we've got about 75,000 people that are commuting each day to the Los Angeles basin. And now we're at the longest commute times in the country. We're talking about 4 hours a day in the car. So high-speed rail makes sense. 30 minutes from Palmdale to Union Station. That is a game changer that changes lives. It reduces stress. It makes people happier. We need alternative modes of transportation. High-speed rail is one of those modes. Expansion of MetroLink service, Amtrak, Greyhound, everything you could think of. We can't rely only on vehicles anymore. As you know, we've been long supporters of high-speed rail and continue to be supporters. We will continue to work with staff and come up with alternatives that create the least amount of local impacts and are mutually beneficial. And we are wrapping up our station planning grant. We, again, appreciate the grant funds for that. We'll present that to our council in the winter of 2018. And I would just say, I say as a collective group, we stay the course, we stay in the fight, and we bring high-speed rail to Southern California. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Behan. Last speaker on this round is Kome Ajize. from Southern California Association of Governments. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Chair Richards, and good morning, board members. My name is Kome Ajise. I'm the Director of Planning at the Southern California Association of Governments. I fear that my comments are also designed for the last two items, but since I'm already up, I would, if you don't mind, crave your indulgence to continue. On behalf of the SCAG Regional Council and Executive Director Hassan Hikrata, I just wanted to just say that we appreciate the fact that, one, you're here in Southern California. We've been looking forward to the meeting. We had hoped it would have been closer to our offices, actually in our office. And we're also glad that we had Secretary Kelly, still call him boss, Secretary Kelly. We're glad to have had Secretary Kelly at our last regional council, and I think our board appreciated the presentation on the new direction of high-speed rail. You've already heard that everybody's happy that you're in Southern California. We in Southern California more so, just to borrow off of Mr. Leahy's point, having half of the population, the SCAG region represents 19 million people, and our current regional transportation plan, the 2016 RTP-SES, counts on the implementation of a high-speed rail system to actually have a sustainable communities into the future. And I would dare say that as we have begun work on the 2020 plan, we will continue to look forward to the implementation of the high-speed rail into the future. So we were really excited to see the business plan continue to push in that direction. Now, the business plan, for one thing, we appreciate the fact that it was more so conservative and transparent in its approach to representing the current cost and potential cost adjustments. I think that's really admirable and serves to continue to create credibility around the program as we would want to see. Understandably, the plan focuses on an iOS going forth to the north first and delaying implementation in Southern California. We understand that even though we feel like we dearly and desperately need for this to be implemented in Southern California. And so we'll continue to work with you, with the staff and with the board to bring about the implementation of the initial projects, the bookend projects in Southern California, and really appreciate you being here and the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Ajise. I have no other comment cards for these items, and so with that, the first public comment period is closed. We'll now move on to the regular agenda, starting with, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Schiff.
Just a moment of personal privilege, if I might. We have in the audience Libby Bradley, who is a graduate student at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs, and my mentee, and she has a great interest in transportation and high-speed rail, and made her way from the west side to join us here. So I just wanted to acknowledge her presence.
Welcome, Ms. Bradley. You've got a great mentor here, so. Okay, thank you, Ms. Shank. We'll move to item 1, which is consideration of the board minutes from the March 20th, 2018 board meeting. Okay, it was moved by Director Camacho. The first second I heard was from Director Rossi. Please call the roll.
Director Shank?
Yes.
Director Rossi?
Yes.
Director Curtin?
Yes.
Director Camacho?
Yes.
Director Miller?
I'm going to abstain since I was not present.
Chair Richard?
Yes. Is that 5? Yeah, great, thank you. Item 2, consideration of increasing the Construction Package 1, or CP1, design-build contract provisional sums for what are called excluded third-party items, the utility relocation. Mr. Hedges.
Morning, sir and board. My name is Joe Hedges. I'm the new Chief Operating Officer for the High Speed Rail Authority. So
I'm sorry, I should have introduced you as such. I guess we introduced you at the last meeting, and I just assumed that. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, well, let me start just basically with the name, CP1, Construction Package Number 1. Excluded because this original task was not included in TPZ's original proposal, And with regards to third-party relocations, it's for AT&T and PG&E. As you remember, back in December of 2016, Change Order 48 included this task into TPZ's tasking and gave them a modification of approximately $158 million. Now, the work is ongoing. There's critical path work, and this $40 million is a bridge, basically, from FY17 to FY18 as to allow that work to continue and not to impede critical path and to incur delay costs. So what I'm asking for right now is $40 million, your authorization of $40 million in FY 2017. And here's what's new, okay? I want to stress that now when we come before the board, I want to give you the EAC, the estimate at completion, which is the budget, and the ETC, the estimate to complete the remaining of that money. So the EAC for this amount is $396 million, which is fully accounted for in the new baseline budget, with an ETC, an estimate to complete, of approximately $169. That 40 is included in the estimate to complete. So you have full disclosure with regards to the total line item cost and the amount required to complete this.
Questions for Mr. Hedges? Director Shane.
Thank you. I have two questions. Saying that this is going to be a shift of $40 million from fiscal 2017-18 for CP1 DB contract. How does that impact the CP1 DB contract, that shift?
What it does is it doesn't upset anything. This is a relocation of unallocated funds from which would be construction package number 5 that we're going to use. So we're going to borrow from construction package number 5, allowing basically for $48 million additional funds that will allow the critical path work to continue. Right now, with regards to the critical path for CP1 right now is in the relocation of predominantly PG&E utilities in the Fresno area.
I have a follow-up, if I may. Will PG&E and AT&T be upgrading? Are we just allocating what's there, or will they be upgrading? And if so, are they paying for that?
It's predominantly moving utilities out of the right-of-way with regards to power lines and communication lines.
I understand that, but will they be
no, there's
using
no
this
betterments.
opportunity to upgrade?
There's no betterments here. The betterments are responsibility of those utilities.
Well, I understand that.
This is to restore back to what
are
they have.
Are they going to use the opportunity to do any upgrade?
I'm not sure, ma'am. I can ask Terry.
I'd like to know that, don't need to tell me this minute, but as a follow-up.
Well,
thank you.
We'll reply back.
Thank you.
Director Rossi.
Your microphone. Oh, I'm sorry. It is on. I just wanted to follow up. What I understood you to say for Lynn's question was, in effect, correct me if I'm wrong. Says it's on. It does say it's on. I can read. You got it? I may not be able to do much else, but I can read. I don't move my lips. I'm sorry. Do you want me to? Let's try this.
You're getting amplified now. I turn that one.
I can just come closer.
I can come closer. Can you hear?
Yes, now? Sir. I can hear you
fine. I apologize. When Lynn asked her first question, in your opening remarks, if I understood you correctly, what you said was that in the new baselining, there is a number, 300 and whatever it is, which will cover this.
Yes, sir. It's $169 million,
right,
which will restore the funding, the 40 back to where they were borrowed.
Which is where you're going to borrow. And that's what I wanted to clarify,
yes,
because
sir.
when you further answered her question, you said you were borrowing it from 5. You're actually taking the funds from 5, but it is in the new baseline, which hasn't been approved until this business plan is approved.
That'll be the 2018. That's why I
Right.
cover bridge strategy
Right.
here.
So it is covered. It is, as you said, your cost to complete is X, whatever that number was. This is all part of that and will be part of that approval process. But until that time, you're moving funds from 5 to get this done, not to impede critical path. Is that, I understand that correctly?
That's an absolute correct statement, sir.
Be the first time in a long time. For me, not you. And the second question I have is, have you done all the risk analysis on this piece that we're now approving?
There's no dispute here. This is for basically to continue on the work. I'm not sure exactly what
I'm talking about the
question
risk
is.
analysis of this amount is the right amount. It's not yet.
I'm confident that the staff has done their job to the EAC of 396. As we've closed, we have a definite visibility to the end right now. So hopefully there's no more increments. And that's what we're trying to manage right now to that budget.
Like Director Shank, whenever you find that detail out, I'd like to understand that.
Absolutely,
okay.
sir. We'll reply back.
Thank you.
Help me out here, Joe, a little bit. So the estimate at completion is the total cost for these third-party movements?
Total cost for all of the third-party excluded relocations, sir.
In CP1?
Yes, sir.
And so the amount that's left is 169?
Approximately, sir.
Okay. I got that. That's good. The question I really have is, where did the 69 million come from, the original estimate that the third-party utilities were going to actually?
Sir, I don't know. I wasn't here.
Okay.
I'm assuming that as in all of the relocations of the utilities, that the scope was significantly underestimated.
Yeah, I'd say so. But thank you for pulling it together and clarifying it. Thanks.
One final question.
Yes, Director Camacho.
Joe, is the work being done by the utilities, or are we doing that now?
The work is going to be done by the utilities, and they're a subcontractor, sir.
So we're going to be paying the utilities?
We're paying the utility. What ends up happening is we pay TPZ, who then has reached an agreement with the utilities, who then is paying the utilities. That's how this is working.
Hold on, I'm looking at our Chief Counsel, Mr. Valens.
We will pay TPZ directly, yes, sir. It is part of modification 48 that included this work.
Just to clarify, yeah, why don't you? I was about to, but I think you're probably in a better position to clarify.
As I understand it, Tom, I'll look to you as well, but I believe that we pay the contractor. They use subcontractors that are approved by the utility to do the work on these assets.
So that is correct.
But the subcontractors paid through the...
It's part of the design build contract, TPZP's design build contract, and the portion that it's a part of is called provisional sums. Those provisional sums are used to relocate two excluded utility companies' utilities, AT&T and PG&E. And the way we use those provisional sums is we issue task orders. The contractor submits a draft task order with scope and budget in it, and then we approve those task orders and pay for that work and then oversee it as a time and material. The utility companies do oversee that as well because the utilities are being relocated and they want to make sure it's done correctly, but it's not a direct payment to the utility companies. It's a payment to the design build contractor through the provisional sums.
Yeah, I want that on the record because in the past I've recused myself on items having to do with utilities because of my past work at PG&E and pension, but as I understand it, no money now with this contract structure will flow through the hands of the utilities. It'll go to the Tuda-Perini-Zachary joint venture. They'll hire subcontractors approved by the utilities, if I understand our CEO correctly. But we're not making payments to PG&E or AT&T.
Correct. That is correct. And it's not done through a contract between AT&T, PG&E, and the authority.
Right. Okay.
This is through the contract
So
design build
the
contract.
privity of contract is with TPZ. Director Schenck had one
Yeah,
question.
but the more I think about it, going back to my second question, I'm a great believer in trust but verify, and I really want to make sure that the utilities, through their approved subcontractors, are not using this as an opportunity to upgrade at our expense, that if there are changes in fiber optics or whatever they're doing, that is going to be at their expense.
We'll ensure that statute is strictly adhered to.
That's good. Mr. Flens, did you want to add anything?
There are agreements directly with the utility companies who are under the purview of the PUC. And we also have some statutes that prevent the betterment when there's a utility relocation, such as we're talking about here. There aren't any betterments, it's just a replacement. So we do have some mechanisms, contract mechanisms, some statutory mechanisms to make sure that this authority is not paying for any betterment to the utility company for these relocations.
Okay. Well, I like Ms. Schenk's approach, not the least of which is to hear her quoting Ronald Reagan is always a good moment. Moved by Director Rossi.
Second.
Seconded by Director Camacho. Secretary, please call the roll.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hedges.
Director Schenck?
Yes.
Director Rossi?
Yes.
Director Curtin?
Yes.
Director Camacho?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chair Richard?
Yes. Okay, that item is done. And next item is consideration of amending the interagency agreement with Caltrans regarding legal services in support of right-of-way acquisition. Mr. Falens.
Good morning, Chairman Richard and board members. I'm Tom Falens, Chief Counsel for the High-Speed Rail Authority. This agenda item is a request to augment the interagency agreement we have with Caltrans for legal services for the delivery of right-of-way, and it's to include the eminent domain process that we would go through for some of these parcels, as well as inverse condemnation services. This contract began in 2012, and it's now extending to June 30th, 2018. We're asking, the present value of the contract, which is an interagency agreement, is $12.4 million. We're asking to augment it by $15.5 million and add 3 years to the contract. We have been using the Caltrans Legal Services since 2012 to do this type of work. The rates that we receive from Caltrans are very good rates. Caltrans is very well qualified to do this type of legal services. To give you an idea of the great value we're getting is the rate that they're charging per hour is $122, which is significantly less than what we would pay in the private sector for similar services, by as much as 60%. We have also a number of parcels noted in the memo. There's 1,918 total parcels at this point in time. At the time of writing this memo, there were 607 parcels left for acquisition, and part of that acquisition process includes the need to go through these legal services to get us into the eminent domain process. We negotiate with property owners, of course, the entire duration of the property acquisition effort, all the way through trial. The reasons that the term is out a couple years to 2021 is because the eminent domain process would include eminent domain trials potentially, and we project that the completion of all the acquisition process could take us out that long because of court dates. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Falens? Director Schenck.
Tom, this would include litigation?
Yes.
Yes. I just want to really take a moment and say that the Caltrans lawyers don't get enough credit for what they do. In this area, there isn't any lawyer that I can think of that is better. My days in the AG's office dealing with Caltrans lawyers, my days as Secretary of BT&H, even Mr. Falens came from Caltrans, and I'm sure Secretary Kelly would agree. we really get our money's worth out of these Caltrans lawyers, and so I'd be happy to make the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shank. I think that's very appropriate. And just before you do, I wanted to clarify, because you used the number of the 1,900 parcels, 1,918, 607 outstanding, because our previous item just related to construction package 1. In the write-up, it makes it clear that those numbers were for the entirety of the first construction segment, right? The 119 miles.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yes,
So
for
it's a
CPs
lot of parcels.
CPs 1 through 4, yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any other questions at this point? Director Curtin.
Well, I'm always interested in bringing costs down. This is a minimal cost in terms of the overall cost that we just spoke about, for instance. And I know getting our right-of-way issues organized in a timely fashion is critical to saving costs overall. Are we, and I know it's been a problem in many respects in both CP1, CP2, and 3, are we getting our hands around delivering these right-of-ways in a timely fashion? Because, well, I have no concerns about the quality of the work. It's the timing of the work and the choosing of the particular right-of-ways. That's the real issue, and maybe we need more people doing it. Maybe there's another process. I don't know. I just want to know if we have this under control so that these right-of-ways will be delivered in a way that doesn't hold up the project delivery.
Sure.
Sir, we made some fundamental change in our right-of-way group. We consolidated our dispersed right-of-ways groups into a single group. We are now using a concept of critical path, where we have analyzed all 3 of the CPs. We're attacking the third-party agreements and right-of-way that's on the critical path. And that's our focus. We're making good progress in achieving that. And what you're going to see as a result of that is substantial work in all 3 CPs being able to be advanced by this summer. So the idea right now is to focus right away and not just be concerned with gross numbers, but be concerned with effective numbers and to define what a critical parcel is. It's associated to something that is on critical path.
That's my answer. Thank you.
Very good. Director Rossi?
Here, Joe.
Joe?
Tom, don't go far.
I think that's great what you just said. I think it's perfectly appropriate, and I agree with Danny. My only question to you is, and I know you are new, but that's what we were told numerous times before we were doing. So I just want to be sure, in fact, that as you move through your course down the path of checking everything that's getting done, that you are cognizant of the fact that we had map plots, critical paths, blue, green, and yellow parcels, all tiered to what was going to be built next, that in fact that is happening now in a real sense to get to the glide path you're talking about.
Sir, I don't care about blue, green. What I care about is critical path. Those parcels are on the critical path identified by the state and the contractor to go to work. So I'm not looking at sheer numbers. I'm looking at basically getting people to work and keeping them to work. I personally am down in the valley every other week with a huge contingency of headquarters staff to include chief counsel, chief engineer, head of rail, all right? We're down there to solve problems and to focus not just on the right-of-way, but on all the impediments that's keeping us from advancing the construction packages from moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Shank had asked to move this item after her, and I think we want to do that. Okay, it was moved by Ms. Shank, seconded by Director Shank, seconded by Director Camacho. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Shank?
Yes.
Director Rossi?
Yes.
Director Curtin?
Yes.
Director Camacho?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chair Richard?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to items 4 and 5. And as we said, we're going to have presentations first and then public comment. But as Ms. Boehm is coming up with Mr. McLaughlin, I do want to address one comment to members of the public who are here today. We're very aware of the fact that the alignment through Southern California is of great concern, particularly to people in the northeast corner of the Los Angeles basin, Shadow Hills, Lakeview Terrace, and the surrounding communities, including Santa Clarita, San Fernando, Pacoima. And we also are very aware that many of you took time from busy schedules to come here today, and we're further aware that many people were desirous of this board holding any meeting that would affect properties or communities in that area in the San Fernando Valley. So I wanted to assure you that today's meeting is to give you an update on our schedule and process. It is not an item in which decisions will be made. I also want to tell you that in response to strong inquiries from your local county supervisor, Supervisor Barger, as well as Councilwoman Rodriguez, I've committed that before we do have a decision, even a decision on an intermediate step like the selection of a preferred alignment path for further analysis, that meeting of this board would occur in your communities somewhere in the San Fernando Valley. So I just wanted to assure the public of that we want to make sure that we're providing people maximum opportunity to participate in the process. And today's decision will update you, meeting will update you, but it will not involve a decision item. So with that, let's turn to item 4. Ms. Boehm, can you give us a Southern California update, please?
Thank you. Board Chair, board members, I will provide some maps and information on the Southern California sections. You can refer to your board item for details. One of the things that we heard very eloquently from some of the folks that commented at the beginning of this meeting was how important it is to work together and the fact that we can do more together than we can separately. And so one of the things that this agency has been moving on since 2012 is certainly the concept of statewide rail modernization, the fact that high-speed rail is part of an integrated, multi-tiered rail network. It forms an electric backbone of that network. And as such, we have been advancing our work in Southern California very much with that at the forefront of our thinking. And there have been a number of contributions to the Southern California network that have been made by high-speed rail. You can see those listed out. You heard about a couple, Rosecrans, Marquardt, and Lincas. And we continue to look at our Southern California projects down here for opportunities to support our local agencies and things that they may want to do ahead of us being able to introduce high-speed rail service to Southern California. So that's very much on our minds as we move forward. Specifically, we're moving forward with 4 phase 1 project sections, and I'll go through several slides that just have a map of that for your reference. The first section that is under progress in Southern California is the Bakersfield to Palmdale section. You can see the map of that here with Bakersfield in the north, Palmdale in the south. This is approximately 80 miles long, and it crosses the Tehachapi Mountains. Lots of things to consider with that, open spaces, ranches, et cetera. And we've been advancing work studying route alternatives there for the last several years, and we've conducted a geotechnical and seismic field evaluation of that section. So we are preparing ourselves to complete basically the environmental process for that section. The next section, which we probably have the most community representatives here today to talk about, is the Palmdale to Burbank section, from Palmdale in the north to Burbank in the south. This is approximately 40 miles long. We have been studying several routes. We've studied literally hundreds of routes over the last several years. We are now studying several routes and looking forward to the comments of the folks here in the room about those several routes. We continue to do studies, and we did conduct a preliminary geotechnical drilling program, drilled as deep as 2,700 feet into the forest. Burbank to Los Angeles is the next project section. Now we are in the urban shared corridor. That's approximately 15 miles with Burbank in the north, LA Union Station in the south. You heard folks speak very eloquently about the place of LA Union Station in mobility within Southern California. And so we are really working very closely with the partners, some of whom spoke earlier, in order to advance the concept to improve and increase their service, as well as open up the opportunity to introduce high-speed rail. And finally, the fourth and most southerly project that we are working on for the phase 1 of Southern California is Los Angeles to Anaheim. You can see it's approximately 30 miles, again, going from Los Angeles down to Arctic, which is the first fully built high-speed rail station in the state, so it's very cool. Again, working very closely with our partners to bring forward a concept that would allow us all to band together to begin to deliver improvements in this corridor that ultimately lead to the introduction of high-speed rail. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark McLaughlin, who is our Director of Environmental Services, and he'll tell you a little bit about the timeline for the decisions that will be made in the future. Mark?
Thanks, Michelle. Mark McLaughlin, I'm the Director of Environmental Services for the Authority. We're going to go through a little bit of an overview for the program today, and then also addressing some Southern California points. As Joe mentioned, right now the Authority has 2 record of decisions, Merced Fresno and Fresno Bakersfield, where we're under construction in the Central Valley. We have imminent Fresno Bakersfield LGA, locally generated alternative, that we look to bring to the board sometime in the fall, and then imminently releasing the draft for the Central Valley Y this year. So lots of progress being made specifically to address Central Valley, and then the rest of the program with the north and the south. And specifically today, this is kind of a high-level overview of our process, and along with the FRA, our federal partners in the NEPA context, and state in the CEQA context of where we are currently in the project for most of the alternatives that remain. We're still doing preliminary engineering and environmental reviews to get to the staff preliminary preferred, as Dan had mentioned, the chair mentioned earlier, of trying to get to that place and public involvement. And our process is definitely a public, transparent process as much as we can make it. Public meetings, stakeholders, we have agency partners, local electeds, and definitely stakeholders within each region. And Michelle and her group in Southern California and in the north and even in the Central Valley continue to meet with stakeholders to address those concerns as it relates to alignments in their communities. So as I mentioned before, we have a definite commitment with the FRA to complete our environmental reviews, and we'll come to you providing staff recommendations for our preliminary preferred alternatives, including here in Southern California. And I had mentioned before, we have agency partners, our stakeholders, and also before we release drafts, we have public hearings to ensure that the public is engaged to know what's going to happen as it goes through the process, what the process means of time frames, public comments, and how they can address those topics. And also, as the chair mentioned before, we'll be coming back to the board with updated schedules and the reviews specifically for alternatives here in Southern California. Also, those board meetings will be held, as the chair mentioned, in those communities, especially in the north also. So we are committed to doing that in those local jurisdictions. And with that.
Could we just go back to your last slide for one
Sure.
second? And again, because I know we have a number of members of the public here who are interested in this. want to make one statement to see if it's correct, which is I know sometimes people are frustrated by the number of alternatives that we have to consider, but it's my understanding that we're commanded by the environmental review process at both the federal and the state level to look at practical alternative alignments, and that we have to get to a certain point of understanding those without just presumptively or preemptively dismissing them, but that then the process does allow us, when we get to a certain point, having done baseline analyses, it does allow us to then select what we consider to be a preferred alternative, which would then go to the finish line of the fully in-depth analysis. I would look at you and also our chief counsel. Is that an accurate description of the environmental process?
That's correct. And then coming forth with the preliminary preferred, we have a pretty good idea of putting that in the draft document. It still goes through the public comment. We have cooperating agencies that we deal with, the Corps and the EPA and others. And then we have a current checkpoint process where we also eventually get through to the preferred alternative for something in the 404B1 analysis in NEPA as it relates to range of alternatives and the preliminary LEDPA, or at least environmentally damaging practical alternative, which we can permit and actually get to build and enable construction. So there is pieces along the line. The public gets to look at the draft, make comments of the preferred, as you mentioned. We have agency partners commenting on that in the regulatory context, and then the board comes to the board and the FRA for the nod and the not ROD decision.
And while the preliminary preferred alignment is not a slam dunk, because further analysis might show some showstopper, but it does signal to the public and to the other relevant agencies that this is the alignment that we believe meets the legal standard. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, I just thought that was important because sometimes it's hard to explain that if we drop these things too quickly, we could be subject to litigation from people to go back and have to restart the process and do it again. So I think that what you've laid out here on this page should basically explain the process that we go through. But we would like to get to the point of picking a preliminary preferred alternative, because I think it at least signals to the community where our thinking is that the alignment is likely to work. Okay, thank you for that. Questions from my colleagues on the board? Ms. Miller?
On your environmental review, I know on the alternatives you're doing some design work. Are you also doing a cost analysis? Or how is that wrapped into the alternative analysis?
There's a cost analysis that's done and a cost estimate as it relates. We have to have that for the environmental review of all the alternatives that are considered and the range of alternatives. So we do have that.
Will that be presented to us at the time of the preliminary preferred alternative?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I think that'll, just knowing this board, they're going to want to know what alternatives cost.
Sure.
Any other questions, Director Curtin?
Just a clarification. So the environmental reviews and the engineering and design are wrapped together for this purpose, but is there sort of an independent look that, without environmental concerns for a moment, that would say there's three alternatives here? One is far superior in terms of design for the system, economics, and the other two are alternatives, but not nearly as cost-effective and efficient for the system.
Right.
So I know we have to review options, but is the same level of analysis needed, or is it better to take a look at this from the perspective of what's the best for the system and then see if there's disqualifying environmental issues?
Yes. So in our NEPA integration MOU, currently we have our checkpoint process, which is checkpoint A is purpose and need, checkpoint B is range of alternatives to get through that. The Corps and the EPA are approving that along with the FRA currently, and then checkpoint C, the preferred alternative. That 404B1 analysis takes into account what you just described, cost, technology, about how we can use in that regulatory context to prove, if you will, our preferred alignment in a permitting context. In that 404B1 analysis, we can use different pieces, as you described, especially cost, time, things like that, practicability. All of those are used to get to the preferred alternative that we currently want to get to and eventually enable construction, which is the most important thing why we're here.
So in essence, there's this, once we have a preferred alternative, there's a much more intense environmental review.
Yes.
To make sure we're not stepping into some unknown there.
That's
But
correct.
there's a preliminary environmental reviews on the others, even if they look to us as really not even remotely close to preferred?
Well, in that document, in the draft document, and then eventually get to the final, we do somewhat of the same level of analysis for all the alternatives to treat them fairly, knowing that one would go further forth as we move forward through the process to pick and get that permitted. We look at them equally. We have to.
Is that environmental analysis?
Yes. In the draft document, knowing that the preferred is where we're going eventually to get to that 404B1 analysis between the draft and the final if we choose to do that.
Okay, that strikes me as a little interesting. I assume it's because it's required, but if there's something that's clearly a straight line, boom, and nothing's in the way,
yes,
we
NEPA,
have to do an extensive analysis of other options just for
we do an equal analysis of all of them. We have to do that in that NEPA context.
Yeah.
We might do a little bit more on that preferred depending on what the context of the engineering analysis might be. Is there tunneling, things like that, that require additional analysis.
All right.
We try and make it, you're correct, we try and make it as straight as we can in that regulatory context. You're correct.
Colleagues, other questions? Just to help people follow through the jargon, the checkpoint process is a specific point in the environmental analysis under the federal NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, where we have to check in with other agencies, right? You mentioned
yes, we have an
Agency.
An integration MOU with the Corps, the EPA, and the FRA.
Right.
And that integration MOU is much more of a streamlining approach, and we have been doing what this current administration is advocating for streamlining through the NEPA combined process.
Simultaneous review, right?
That's correct.
And you mentioned the 404B, that's section 404B of the Clean...
404B1, yeah, the Clean Water Act, that's correct.
Which is administered by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Correct.
Okay. Complicated process. I appreciate the cogent thing. Director Schenk, were you wanting to ask a question?
I want to make or ask Michelle a question, but it's only tangentially related to this, so maybe it's better after the motion on this to keep it clean. It's up to you.
That's fine.
There is no motion here. This is information only.
Oh, no motion. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
And with full permission to the chairman and Michelle to roll their eyes. But there are many people new on.
This other board member.
No, you haven't heard this yet. You haven't heard this. There are a few people who haven't heard this, and I take every opportunity that I can to ask the question about San Diego to LA. I know it's phase 2. A little bit of history for, not you, but for others. When the concept of high-speed rail in this state started in 1981, when I was Secretary of Business, Transportation, Housing, and Governor Jerry Brown was in Jerry Brown 2.0. That's when this started. And it started with the idea that the high-speed rail would be between San Diego, Los Angeles, because even then it was the second busiest Amtrak corridor in the country. When the votes were taken on the alignments, well, you know, frankly, the politics was in the north, even though the people were in the south. But we have San Diego to LA in phase 2, and we've made sort of a moral commitment here to try and do everything we can to speed that up. So this is the time we're in Southern California, so Michelle, I don't mean to catch you off guard, but if you have something that you can add about where we stand with that corridor.
So I spoke about statewide rail modernization at the beginning and the fact that if we work together, we can achieve more. The work that we're doing on the phase 2 for LA to San Diego is in partnership with the Inland Corridor Group, a group of agencies that have come together that include Metro, San Bernardino, Riverside, San Diego, Caltrans, and even the San Diego Airport, to take a look at what we're doing there and try to describe what we would believe is an early route alternatives that we would seek to study in further depth as we go down the line. One of the great things that the state of California has done in the last 6 months or so is release a state rail plan. we released a new state rail plan that really described a state of mobility for California, very different than what we've described in there in the past. And we worked very closely with the state rail plan folks because they described something very specific, a very specific vision for Southern California and for LA to San Diego and for the importance of going through the Inland Empire to provide an additional level of connectivity. So one of the things that we did for LA to San Diego is we worked very closely with them. We slowed down the work we were doing because we knew they were going to put forth some policy information that would be very beneficial to us. We're now working on wrapping up a feasibility study for LA to San Diego, which we're planning to complete in the next couple of months, which basically summarizes all of the analysis that we've done to date, because several things are very important. Number one, that we signal that it exists, that we are working on it, and number two, that we signal to people where we think it will go so that as other agencies plan for the future, they can look at planning multimodal transportation hubs at the locations that high-speed rail, for instance, would be looking at for our stations, which are Ontario Airport, for instance, and the San Diego Airport. So that's what we've been doing over the course of the last couple of years. I think, obviously, you probably wish it was a little bit more, but I think it's very effective to help us set the policy and explain to the state of California why that connection is so important.
And your guesstimate, your expert opinion, your guesstimate, will it be in this century? I know it won't be my lifetime, but will it be in this century that we will see high-speed rail between San Diego and Los Angeles?
We're in the 21st century, absolutely. Absolutely, we will see, because it is the foundation ultimately of express service connections to Phoenix and express service connections to Las Vegas. There's a much broader mobility plan, which the state rail plan describes for the southwest region of the United States in order to connect us better to really serve, you know, the growth and the vision that we have for the future.
Well, actually, Ms. Shank, you'll be very happy to know I have some late breaking news on this, which was about 10 o'clock last night over drinks, albeit Rossi was having a Coke and I was having a bourbon. We agreed that when our time on this authority board is done, we're going to start a company to build LA to San Diego high-speed rail. Mike agreed to be the CFO. Kurt Ramey agreed to come out of retirement, so we're going to get this done.
And where's my role?
You're the mother of the project, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add just one more comment. And I share some of the frustrations that you had mentioned early on. My first meeting on this board was almost 3 years ago in Los Angeles, where we had a pretty healthy discussion about these alternatives. And I do find it it's frustrating and a bit baffling that we're still grappling with even the preferred alternative point. So if you could wrap this up, the sooner the better. I know it's controversial, unlike anything else we do with our high-speed rail, but I'd just like to see it done pretty quickly, so thank you.
Okay, with that, let me express appreciation to Ms. Boehm and Mr. McLaughlin for very cogent but complete presentation, and ask the pleasure of the board for a motion. Oh, I'm sorry.
You said there was no motion.
I know, I did.
It was that bourbon or the contract?
Yeah, well, it could. Only one. Sorry. The pleasure of the board is that the chairman get his act together. Okay. With that, we'll move. Thank you both. We'll move to the last informational item, which is the report on the draft 2018 business plan. Our CEO, Brian Kelly, is going to walk us through the elements of the plan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Kelly, High-Speed Rail Authority. Like I did at the March hearing, I thought I'd walk through a summary of the business plan, which I know you've all seen and looked at for the public's purposes. It looks like this. A copy of it is available on our website, and I'll go ahead and summarize the document. First, why do we do the plan? It is required by law. The Public Utilities Code represents the status of the program at a certain point in time. We summarize the approach to implementing the system, and it includes things like updated capital costs and other estimates, updated ridership and revenue forecasts, a summary of our progress over the last 2 years, and a review of our current challenges and how we will address those challenges going forward. This year, the final plan is due to the legislature on June 1st, and of course, we released the draft plan on March 9th, and as the chair indicated, this is our second public hearing on the matter. Importantly, the plan reiterates our commitments. Primarily is to deliver what the voters asked for in California in 2008, and that is the full delivery of the Phase 1 system with the approval of Proposition 1A, it's a San Francisco to Los Angeles, Anaheim full program, statewide program. Our objective is to deliver the Silicon Valley to Central Valley line as soon as possible. We define that in this plan as San Francisco to Bakersfield. And we note the importance of Merced being a high priority as a connecting point in the Central Valley. We continue to plan for Phase 2 extensions, as noted in by the prior speaker, Merced to Sacramento in the north, Los Angeles to San Diego via the Inland Empire here in Southern California. And we work with our valued partners to advance modern integrated statewide rail network, and I thought Michelle did a fine job of describing the work we've done on that, the work we have going forward, and much of that is integrated in the state rail plan, a draft of which was released in March, and a final draft will be released about 2 weeks after our business plan will come forward. This draft plan, 2018, does offer a very candid discussion about the challenges that are before us. We are clearly implementing a series of complex integrated mega projects, and I think it's worth spending just a moment on that. Lost in the size and scope of a 520-mile Phase 1 high-speed rail system is this little stretch in the Central Valley, which is 119 miles, which is a huge, huge construction undertaking. If you think about that, it takes 2 hours just to drive that construction project. So this is a very large mega project in every sense and really every step of the way. We face the same challenges at this project that many international projects of similar magnitude and complexity have faced and have successfully addressed. And our business plan shows that our cost estimates have increased, which I will go into more detail on momentarily. We need greater certainty on funding, and our delivery schedule has been extended. The draft business plan identifies these challenges and provides strategies going forward to manage those challenges. Revised cost estimates and a new approach. First on the cost estimates, they're indicated below. I'll go to the second bullet first here. The new baseline estimates for the Central Valley construction stretch is $10.6 billion, which we propose to complete by 2022. That is part of our federal funding agreement with the FRA. Silicon Valley to Central Valley, the Valley to Valley line is now estimated at 29.5 and a completion date of 2029. I'll note that there is 1.9 billion of this number is for an extension further into Bakersfield from the prior stop that was just north of Bakersfield in the Wasco area. And our Phase 1 estimate is now at 77.3 with a completion schedule, assuming full funding, of 2033. We did apply a new approach here as we discussed these cost estimates with the public and the legislature, and we've put these baseline estimates in ranges. And we've applied what I would call as a sort of best industry standard based on where we are in project development to couch the baseline estimates in both a low and a high of cost ranges, again, based on where we are in the stage of project development. Jumping back up, it's important to note that about 83% of the costs that we've described below are tied to really three key areas. One is the identified cost increases in the Central Valley, which this board contemplated publicly in January, estimated at about $2.8 billion. Inflation from the push out of the schedule, escalation due to inflation and the cost of pushing out the schedule. And the third is establishing a higher contingency that better reflects risk and uncertainty around sort of our unknowns going forward. That's about 83% of the total cost estimates in the plan. Moving forward with funding uncertainty, this program does require that we deliver the program. It involves major procurements and long lead times. Currently, we're operating on a pay-as-you-go approach to funding, and this business plan picks up a proposal that was in the 2016 plan, which is to try to finance the cap-and-trade revenue stream. It's very difficult to fund a project of this size and scope on a pay-as-you-go basis. We indicated in 2016 an intention to
finance our revenue stream so we can pull dollars forward and meet our shorter-term capital costs. We continue with that proposal in the 2018 plan. Important progress in the area of cap and trade includes the passage and enactment of AB 398 last year, which did extend the cap and trade program to 2030, and also applied the remaining 25% per year of that revenue source to this program. And so that continuous appropriation of 25% of those annual revenues continues going forward. Over the next 2 years, we'll continue to advance the system with our current and committed funding, and we'll explore options to create an investment-grade financing, which involves some statutory help we'll need to make sure we can issue revenue bonds against a revenue stream like cap and trade. As I mentioned earlier, we also show in this plan for the first time these costs sort of couched in ranges. While we have challenges, and we're very clear on what those are in this business plan, there are some principles that this board adopted in 2016 and articulated in that business plan that we continue forward here. I think it's particularly relevant and important because we don't have all the money we need to build the entirety of the system, and so you have to adopt some principles going forward. And the three that were indicated in the 2016 plan that we advanced in the 2018 plan is still the goals, the objectives to initiate high-speed rail service as soon as possible, to make strategic concurrent investments that will be linked over time and provide shorter-term or more immediate mobility, economic, and environmental benefits, again, at the earliest possible time. And of course, position ourselves to construct additional segments as funding becomes available. Part of that, of course, is to complete the environmental work in all segments statewide as we go forward in the construction of the Central Valley and expand out of the Central Valley. When you complete that work, you put ourselves in position to take advantage of funding opportunities wherever they may come up to advance the program. Our proposed path forward and sort of a priority way that we outline in this business plan is a couple of important steps. The first is we are reiterating a very high commitment to meet our commitments to the federal government, our federal funding partner. So everybody knows the federal government has provided $3.4 billion to this program. We have already spent $2.5 billion of that in the Central Valley. With that becomes some performance requirements that the authority has, including dates by which we finish construction in the Central Valley and by when we get the environmental work done. And so we really committed in this plan that those are our initial primary commitments. We look to extend the Silicon Valley to Central Valley line to really identify that as between San Francisco and Bakersfield. As this body outlined again in the 2016 plan, that stretch from San Francisco to Bakersfield is the highest revenue, highest ridership valley stretch. And so we, in this plan, clarify that that's our objective. We have the opportunity, although we'll have some more work to do, but the opportunity to deliver. I mean, I think I should stop and just say, I think sometimes when you're issuing a plan and you're issuing it in the world of increased costs and delayed schedules, the public tends to focus on what you cannot do. It's important to reiterate in this plan what we think we might be able to do or can do. And one of the things we can do with the dollars we have available is deliver almost 224 miles of high-speed rail-ready infrastructure for passenger service. We hope by 2027. That's going to take some further analysis. We're going to report back on that analysis in our project update report in March of 2019. But there's a great potential to move this forward with what we have as we seek to expand the program. We also, in this plan, want to isolate the tunnels that would connect the Silicon Valley and Gilroy stretch in the west with the Central Valley in the east. Those tunnels in the Pacheco Pass is the final piece to complete that valley-to-valley service and really isolate that as the issue, the unfunded amount to be funded as we go forward. Of course, we'll continue our early bookend investments in Southern and Northern California. And in this business plan, we've identified in Southern California not just our commitment and our partnership on the Rosecrans-Marquardt grade separation, but in this plan also being a full funding partner on the LA Union Station redesign. And of course, we'll continue to work to complete Phase 1 system just as soon as we can. I'll roll through these very quickly. I already mentioned them verbally, but again, our commitments to our federal partner, completing our construction in the Central Valley, all the environmental reviews for phase one. I mentioned the phased valley-to-valley approach. Again, we complete the 119 miles Madera to Poplar by 2022. We can expand to Bakersfield and perhaps north of Madera for a Central Valley segment, expand the electrification project in the west, San Francisco to San Jose to Gilroy, and consider some initiation of service either through our partners or with us, that's subject to further analysis, to initiate some kind of service as soon as 2026, 27, and again, isolate the Pacheco Pass tunnels as the unfunded work that we need to get completed to get the valley-to-valley done. And that there's a lot of early work that we can get done through further geotechnical review, design refinement, finishing the environmental reviews, get all of that work done so we can further de-risk that tunnel as we go forward. As I mentioned, Merced remains a high priority, and our goal is to still attain full service in valley-to-valley by 2029. Michelle did a nice job of talking about the Burbank, LA, Anaheim bookend investments. We've covered those, but again, just quickly, it's about a 45-mile corridor. We are already a partner, very much a partner down here. This board, prior to my arrival, had approved an $18 million partnership for planning around the Link Union Station improvement project. You had already approved the Rosecrans-Marquardt grade separation for $76 million. And again, we are proposing here to move the remaining $500 million bookend for the LA Union Station project. Again, this sort of repeats prior, but sort of a building blocks approach to complete phase one, Central Valley segment, all phase one environmental reviews, complete the bookend investments, deliver our Silicon Valley to Central Valley. This says smaller bites, but I prefer building blocks, and then secure funding and financing for completing phase one as we go forward. And again, you got a large state commitment here. If nothing else comes in, I think we estimate our available revenues about $22.4 billion. There's a lot we can do with that, and we look forward, going forward, once the environmental reviews are done everywhere, to continue to be a partner with our federal government for grants and loans, continue to look for private partners as we go forward, and perhaps have the opportunity to monetize proceeds from the valley-to-valley service. There are some things that, of course, we've learned on this project, and we want to apply them going forward. Again, some of these I'll roll through a bit quickly. We've got an entire chapter in the business plan, Chapter 4, dedicated to lessons learned and mitigating risk going forward. And the first is we clearly, while there are a lot of benefits of our timing and moving to construction, we also moved before all the risks were realized and understood at the time that we awarded some of those contracts. This practice we get away from going forward on construction contracts, right-of-way procurement, third-party agreements, utility relocations. We'll have those more in hand, understood, known to the extent we can, completed and incorporated prior to future contract awards. We say we want to transform from a planning organization to a project delivery organization. There's still work to do in that area. Bringing in Mr. Hedges, our Chief Operating Officer, was the first step in that. We are moving forward on filling other important vacant positions in that area. I'm looking forward very soon to announcing the appointment of a new Director of Real Property, and we are starting the interview process for the Risk Assessment Director as well. But it's important to note we still have to continue to be a strong planning organization as well, because we have work to do going forward for future segments of this project. This was discussed, I think, earlier, particularly in the conversation with Joe's presentation, but we are getting, after we adopt this plan, toward a revised baseline budget, which then we can use and apply and manage against scope, schedule, and budget, a defined budget for the remaining of the program. We'll bring that to you in June after the adoption of the business plan in May. As I noted before, in this business plan, we are estimating our out-year project costs, not so much trying to estimate by the dollar, but putting it in the context of ranges, giving us sort of bookends to manage against going forward. As we said, we continue to move the valley-to-valley in some say smaller bites. Again, I prefer building blocks, but that's our last element there. It's always important, I think, to remind people why we want to do this project. High-speed rail has three key elements that I always think about when I think about the project, and these are benefits in the area of economy, environment, and mobility. And on the economy, of course,
We are already putting thousands of people to work in the Central Valley. There are nearly 1,800 tradespeople are working on that project today. Joe Hedges is our lead in being dedicated to expand that construction activity, expand that construction site. I expect to see those numbers go up as we get into the summer of 18, and we got more and more construction happening. We have now, I think we estimate 437 small businesses, mostly California small businesses, working on the project. And we have an economic impact just in the Central Valley of in excess of $5 billion just from the investments made this far. Moving forward, vital new linkages between our economic centers. The Silicon Valley, of course, has a out-of-control housing market, and there's a great opportunity to link the Central Valley and the Silicon Valley in a way that is clean, much more efficient, and provide some expanded affordable housing opportunities for the workforce there. Again, new job opportunities as companies consider siting locations and what kind of infrastructure is available for where they may site businesses. Great opportunity for collaboration between higher education universities in the Central Valley, CSU Bakersfield, UC Merced, CSU Fresno, CSU Sacramento. I mean, you can kind of roll through the Central Valley. There's a lot of great opportunity there. And of course, sustaining our economic competitiveness in the 21st century. I would just note that virtually all advanced economies have some version of high-speed rail, and we do not. Greater mobility, this is probably my favorite chart in the, colors could be better, but it's my favorite chart in the rail plan. That green bar on that chart is really the estimate of travel times for high-speed rail, and it is comparison to today's travel opportunities for Californians between those 2 points. The blue is vehicle and the purple is the traditional intercity rail service we provide today. As you can simply see by the chart, this is a project that proposes to cut travel times for people significantly, and I think that's one of the great benefits of this project and is really a transformative and game changer for how Californians will get around. Finally, it's important to note the environmental benefits of this project. This is a chart that was originally in a document put out by the Air Resources Board in their scoping plan. On the left, the smaller bar chart is the accumulation of all GHG emission benefits from investments made to date for other investments they're making with cap and trade dollars and the emission benefit they'll get. On the right, that larger bar chart is the estimate of our emission benefits when we're at full operations. And I think it shows that this is certainly a sound investment for policies in the era of climate change. Finally, just a bit of housekeeping here. As I mentioned earlier, the 60-day public comment period ends on May 7th, started on March 9th when we issued the draft plan. There are many ways to comment via online. We have a email address there that folks can reach. A phone number, a voicemail line is available. And of course, you can also use traditional mail. And we just noted that this is our second meeting. First was in Sacramento on March 20th. Now this one here in Los Angeles. Our next meeting will be roughly in the second or third week of May in the San Jose area. Next steps, again, we will receive comments. Some here today will be part of the comment, and then as we head to the May board meeting, we will take those comments and reflect some of those comments in the draft itself, at least have a sheet available to the public and the board on what comments we have received, what our responses to those comments are, and where we make any changes to the draft based on that public comment. And we will propose it for board adoption at the May hearing. And again, under the statute, we have to provide a final draft adopted by by this body to the legislature by June 1st this year. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. I know you made a similar presentation in Sacramento, so I will see if board members have any questions at this time for Mr. Kelly. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. With that, then, we turn to the second public comment period. And I'm going to take cards in the order that we got them. We'll start with Mike Murphy, who was in the first session, followed by Kathleen Trinity and Mike O'Gara.
Good morning, Chairman Richard and members of the board. I'm Michael Murphy. I'm the Intergovernmental Relations Manager for the City of Santa Clarita. Santa Clarita is one of the communities potentially impacted by the proposed alignments within the Palmdale to Burbank segment. The City of Santa Clarita appreciates the Board of Directors coming to Southern California today, and we appreciate your commitment to a future San Fernando Valley meeting. We hope that as additional work moves forward on the Palmdale to Burbank segment, that you will receive presentations and as you receive presentations and take actions on that segment, that there will be additional meetings held in Southern California. That obviously affords folks who are most impacted by the proposal the opportunity to speak to you directly, and we appreciate your recognition of that. I would like to take this opportunity to reiterate the Santa Clarita City Council's position relative to the Palmdale to Burbank project segment. While the City Council deeply appreciates that the board and staff have listened to the comments that have come from the city and out of our community, the Council remains uneasy that there are still above-ground segments on the three proposed alignments. On July 14, 2015, the Santa Clarita City Council adopted a position that supports only fully underground alignments between Palmdale and Burbank in order to minimize impacts to all of the affected communities. As the environmental review process continues, the City Council and staff and members from the Santa Clarita community look forward to continuing to work with you and your staff to hear our concerns and incorporate those concerns into the final environmental documents. Finally, I want to highlight the City Council's previous request to you that the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board and staff continue to work with Southern California Association of Governments and its regional partners to facilitate early investment in regional rail infrastructure to increase interregional connectivity, speed, capacity, and safety. Thank you so much for consideration of my comments today.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Next, Kathleen Trinity, followed by Mike O'Gara, followed by Gary, I hope I pronounced it correctly, August. Ms. Trinity, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Richard and board members. I'm Kathleen Trinity from Acton. As you consider the options, please also consider matters of the utmost value that are not just financial or technical. A, those whose lives will be deeply disrupted. B, communities whose social fabric and economic structure will be rent apart. C, environmental damage brought to natural areas and wilderness. We who live in the Red Rover and East Acton equestrian communities understand the delicate balance between nature and community, and we value our natural surroundings. Close relationships with other community members enrich our lives and help us to live in a rural area. But when entire neighborhoods will be torn apart by huge viaducts with wide swaths of scraped land on either side, accompanied by switching and maintenance facilities, when deafening trains will be topped with electrical harnesses and pass every 6 minutes in a mountainous echo chamber, frightening horses and blighting the community, then we know that our values are not your values, and that's a pity. We realize that we are simply objects in a path that may never come to fruition. But I say these are the values by which we live. These are the values which must predominate, and an inherently flawed plan is what needs to be changed. High-speed rail will be no boon to commuters on the 14 freeway. What average worker is willing to pay or can pay $80 to $100 a day to commute to and from a job? That won't take them off the roads. That's a job for Caltrans, Metrolink, or light rail. So I ask you, please, do consider much less destructive routes, because what I see right now is pretty destructive and will definitely change our community for the worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trinity. Mike O'Gara, yes, sir.
Morning.
Followed by Gary August, and then Victor Lindenheim.
My name's Mike O'Gara, and I've lived in Sun Valley for 45 years. I'm the Planning Committee Chairman for the Sun Valley Area Neighborhood Council, but I'm not here speaking for them, I'm speaking for myself. I wish to recommend refined ET for the route from the Burbank station to the Palmdale. Do not go to Palmdale on route refined E1 or refined SR14 because of costs. Coming above ground, surface construction will cost a fortune. It'll be, if you come through the other routes, you're going to create major disruption to many businesses and residents along the San Fernando Road in Sun Valley, Pacoima, and Arleta. Stay underground with the boring machines, no cut and fill. Sun Valley would also be a great place for a maintenance yard. When the high-speed train is built, the economy on the west coast of North America will be the third or fourth largest in the world if you go from Ensenada, Mexico, straight up the coast to Vancouver, British Columbia. And someday that'll happen, long after I'm done. But you can get this high-speed train, get it done, please. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Gary Agus, I hope I pronounced that correctly, then Victor Lindenheim,
You're close, it's Agus.
Agus, Mr.
Yeah.
Agus, my apologies. Go ahead, sir.
No problem, very common. You can destroy that name several different ways. Thank you. Good morning. I am Gary Agus. I grew up in Sun Valley. I'm a member of the neighborhood council, been very active on the planning committee, and have been following high-speed rail very closely. I'm in favor of refined route E2 because it is underground through Sun Valley. That section should be tunneled, however, and not trenched, fully underground. I think that's the best route for Sun Valley. In addition, I would like to see a maintenance facility that would be very beneficial to Sun Valley. We have several areas that would be ideal. They are presently occupied by auto recycling companies and former mining sites. So it's been looked at in the past for a maintenance, and that would also be very beneficial to Sun Valley. And thank you all for your work on this project.
Thank you, sir. Victor Lindenheim, then Bill Ike, I believe it is, and David Leggett.
Good morning, Chairman Richard and board. My name is Victor Lindenheim. I'm here representing the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce today, which I co-chair the Government Affairs and Transportation Committee. I want to thank you for your sensitivity and awareness of the issues that face the Santa Clarita Valley and neighboring communities, and particularly want to shout out to Michelle Boehm and her team, who has frequently come out with her to Santa Clarita Valley with our outreach program and colleagues and listen to our concerns. My comments today will essentially echo that of Mr. Murphy, representing the city of Santa Clarita. And I'll just read an excerpt, and I do have a letter from the chairman of the board of the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber that I'll just provide you with. We represent 900 businesses in the community and are opposed to any above-ground project which will create a damaging economic and environmental impact on our community, which cannot be mitigated. That's the essence of what we have to say, and I just want to add Santa Clarita, you may know, is one of the fastest-growing cities in the state, currently the third most populous city in the county of Los Angeles, and we're growing fast and continuing to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bill Ike, did I pronounce that correctly, sir? Or followed by David Leggett.
You got that exactly right. Thank you.
Good.
And it's good to see you again, sir.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Bill Ike. I appreciate Mr. Rossi's comments. I, too, was at the meeting where Mr. Rossi was first there, and he was kind enough to come down and actually talk to me afterwards. This is about the business plan. If you look at page 51 of the business plan, it says engineering and environmental section states that there are unknowns about tunnels and mountain terrains, and that the California High-Speed Rail will conduct preliminary hazard analysis. That analysis has already been done. You have a over 60-page report that was done in March of 2017. I've attached it to my official comments, and it talks about the geotechnical, you can say challenges, or you can say something else about why you should not drill or tunnel through the Angeles National Forest. So when you're talking about alternatives, and you have to have a range of alternatives, you have to have a range of feasible alternatives. tunneling through the Angeles National Forest is not a feasible alternative. You can check with your lawyers. I checked with my lawyers, that would be me, and it's not required to discuss infeasible alternatives. So for instance, they talk about some of the design problems through the Angeles National Forest. It specifically says, squeezing ground will be encountered, affecting tunnel boring machines, performance and possible forcing TBM rescues. That means you're going to drill down 2,600 feet to rescue the tunnel boring machine that is stuck underground. Now, you hired the guy from Seattle, so he should have a lot of experience with Big Bertha, all right? But this is a report that you prepared over a year ago. Talks about linings and enlarged tunnel sections are needed. May I continue? I'll see if I can summarize this.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Okay. The problem is you're putting linings, tunnels here. There's no tunnel lining that can withstand more than 25 bars. That's PSI pressure. Okay. Over 1/3, 6.5 miles of the E2 route and 6.5 miles of the E1 route exceed that 25 bars. These tunnels are guaranteed to leak. Okay, with corrosive water, you're going to end up having problems with the tunnel itself, the track, and this is all in your report that was done over a year ago. Now, you might not have seen it because it's, you guys get lots of paper. I have a couple of other things, but one is on page...
Can you finish in about 15 seconds, sir? Let me point out there'll be other opportunities for public comment on these. But
okay, I think that you should remove any reference to the tunnel under the Swiss Alps from the business plan. That's granite. This is not granite. That tunnel was created prior to this report in 2017. So if that had any effect, it would have been in your technical report. So talking about Swiss tunnels at 8,000 feet is disingenuous. Also, if I were doing a business plan, part of my business plan would be, what's my exit strategy? If I don't get the money, where do I stop? How does this end? There's nothing in this business plan that talks about that. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Ike. And as I said, there'll be multiple opportunities to talk about the alignments as we go forward.
Hopefully more than 2 minutes.
Next is David Leggett, followed by Kelly Decker, and then Cindy Bloom.
Good morning. I'm David Leggett with the California Public Utilities Commission, and just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak and say that I'm with the Office of Rail Safety with Roger Clugston. We will be cooperating or working in conjunction with the FRA and as you move forward. In general, my question was about the true cost of the high-speed rail project, and you've mentioned a lot of things that are good that I think should be considered. Our strategic initiatives at CPUC are safety, reliability, and affordability. Part of safety is climate change concerns and greenhouse gases and the cost of the significant use of electricity as you move forward. And so what I haven't seen is the cost of doing nothing. In your literature, you've said $77 billion. What is the real cost of doing nothing, and how do you compare that to the alternatives of what impact it would have of not having high-speed rail? Are there benefits of this approach using electrical system, and what is that going to save in terms of greenhouse gas emissions? And then also, are you really including enough for safety, because that's our other major concern? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Kelly Decker, followed by Cindy Bloom. Ms. Decker, before you start, I noticed I had duplicate comment cards from Mr. O'Gara and Mr. Agus, and I think we're going to just assume that your last comments covered both cards, but okay, thank you. All right, excuse me, Ms. Decker, thank you.
Hi,
Please
thank you. I'm Kelly Decker. I live in Cagle Canyon. This project is supposed to link San Francisco to Los Angeles, but really it's a series of links. It's 8 or so project sections that create a chain. And just like in an actual chain, if any one link fails, the entire project or the entire chain fails. The Palmdale to Burbank link is a failure because there's not a single alternative under consideration that utilizes an existing transportation corridor. All 3 proposed alignments go through the Angeles National Forest. In agenda item number 4, Michelle Boehm wrote up a summary that said that the authority is committed to making the environment a top priority. If that were true, you would be considering at least one alternative alignment that does not go through the Angeles National Forest. And when Mr. Kelly talked about greenhouse gas emissions, if you really wanted to be transparent, you would publish in your business plan the truth, and that is the construction of this infrastructure project will create more greenhouse gases than will ever be reduced or recouped through ridership as long as the train is in operation. The current business plan acknowledges that the authority doesn't even know enough about how to tunnel through the San Gabriel Mountains to even come up with a cost estimate for our project section. But as Bill mentioned, the geotechnical investigation that was conducted over a year ago concluded that tunneling was technically infeasible and cost prohibitive. So everybody knows that a whole is only as good as the sum of its parts, and a business plan that includes this fatally flawed project section should not be adopted as a whole. Thank you.
Excuse me, thank you, Ms. Decker. Cindy Bloom, followed by Lynn Toby, and then Catherine Paul.
Good afternoon, Cindy Bloom, Shadow Hills. Mr. Richard, you have consistently stated that the authority is merely carrying out what the voters approved in 2008. Well, the fact is, the voters approved Prop 1A based on a $45 billion budget, not $64 billion, not $68 billion, and certainly not $77.3 billion. I've got it right here. And this excludes interest of $10 billion that must be paid to bondholders. So $77.3 billion is really $87.3 billion. Think about that. And every month you get updates, and every month you act like everything is fine. It is not fine. You are all intelligent people. Do you truly believe that staff and consultants really know what they're doing? Here are the budgets going back to 1996 in billions. 16.5, 25, 37, 45, 33.6, 43, 98.1, 68.4, 67.6, 64.2, and now 77.3 billion. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. And the business plan suggests that one way to help pay for this thing is to securitize future revenue and borrow against it. Won't the private investor and/or the train operator have a say in this? Don't they expect to receive the ridership revenue? If it's tied up as collateral and they can't touch it, why would anyone want to partner with you? Well, the good thing is it is creating jobs for lawyers. But actually, the cost per job is $1.4 million, not exactly a bargain. The bottom line is enough is enough. 77.3 billion crossed the line. 5 billion has been spent, and not a single inch of track has been laid. You can't even build the easy Central Valley portion on time and on budget. So how can you expect to build the Palmdale to Burbank segment with 30 miles of tunneling 2,500 feet below ground? This project is doomed. Please stop rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Cut the losses and turn whatever's been built into a tourist attraction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bloom. Lynn Toby, and then Catherine Paul, followed by Charles Follett.
Good morning. My name is Lynn Toby, and I live in Shadow Hills, one of the last rural communities in the city of Los Angeles. I'm glad to hear you know the names of some of our communities, because they aren't mentioned in the highly anticipated but blisteringly disappointing 2018 business plan. Our communities have been held hostage for over 3 years to this badly flawed and completely underfunded plan. I looked forward to the business plan with great anticipation, hoping some of my questions and concerns would be answered. Imagine my disappointment at the almost total lack of information on the Palmdale to Burbank section. Was this an intentional insult directed at the Northeast San Fernando Valley residents? We're not blank spaces on a map. We pay taxes, send our kids to school, worship in our sanctuaries, and go about our daily business, while you make decisions that will tear our communities apart. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has monumental environmental treasures, all of which are threatened by the Palmdale to Business segment that you have deemed so unimportant that it's barely an afterthought in one of the appendix tabs to the plan. And you do know that drilling through sandstone is very different from drilling through granite, because we're not sure you do. And now the project's being audited by not just the state of California, but by the Federal Department of Transportation. We want to know, where did all the billions go? And we're going to find out, and I think you should be worried about that. Members of the board, we deserve better. We deserve your attention and respect, neither of which we've received. For over 3 years, the SAFE Coalition has repeatedly requested information, sought clarification, and finally demanded a local meeting so our concerns could be heard and addressed on the land that will be destroyed by this project. The response to date has been nothing. What we've been shown is contempt, condescension, and scorn. We've been given falsified reports, incomplete environmental studies, and wagons full of empty promises. The SAFE Coalition will continue to demand answers, pertinent information, and your statement that E1, E2, and SR 14 are off the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tobey. Catherine Paul, followed by Charles Follett and Joe Adams.
I'm Catherine Paul. I live in Cagle Canyon. I'm talking about the business plan. Although the 2018 business plan sounds pretty, it also makes ungrounded assumptions, lacks transparency, and contains vague assertions. I question its language and its logic. For example, its statement that Los Angeles commuters lose 102 hours to congestion every year is unrelated to high-speed rail plans. For example, if one of the state's environmental goals is, quote, to protect endangered species, how will high-speed rail accomplish that goal? For example, there can't be mere assumptions about infill development. Where is specific information? Another example, the plan mentions, quote, aggressive management and mitigation strategies when acquiring land. I wonder what those might be. Also, while it's understandable that costs are based on assumptions, it is not realistic to project ridership or even maintenance costs for 2030 when the train might become a reality. It is important to make what has been started a success, especially where real ridership is a current need and can be met. After that, we should cut the losses, end the project, and use cap-and-trade monies expediently. I doubt that the framers and voters of Prop 1A 10 years ago had a realistic understanding of California's geography and its politics. I hope that the legislature will look at reality on June 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Adams.
Charles Follett, right? Wasn't I next?
I was flipping. Yes, Charles Follett, I'm sorry. I did. Excuse me,
okay.
You were after Ms. Paul. My apologies.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Richard, Mr. Kelly, and board members. My name is Charles Follett from the city of Santa Monica. It is my hope that you, the California Legislature, and the California High-Speed Rail Authority are successful in constructing and operating the California bullet train from San Francisco to Los Angeles. The primary difficulty in achieving this is the segment from Bakersfield to Los Angeles. Much has been written regarding the cost and time required to traverse and tunnel through the Tehachapi and San Gabriel Mountains, to the point where many feel that Bakersfield may ultimately be the final southern terminus. To ensure that Los Angeles is in fact in play, it's time for the authority to think outside the box. From a geological, geographical, logistical, and financial standpoint, there is an alignment that will enable the completion of the project sooner than expected and well under budget. Upon study, it is likely that the most logical alignment to Los Angeles is the following southwest route. Depart Bakersfield to the southwest from through Maricopa and Vintucopa to the junction of SR 33 and Lockwood Valley Road. From here, tunnel under the Los Padres National Forest all the way to SR 33 freeway between Ojai and Ventura at Casitas Springs. Parallel the freeway into Ventura, then head south along the already established right-of-way all the way to Los Angeles Union Station. The tunneling distance will be approximately 17 to 20 miles compared to a total of 36 miles of tunnels along the Tehachapi-San Gabriel route. One tunnel measuring 17 miles in length along that route. With lower elevation gain to deal with than the Tehachapi route, the tunnel and tracks under the Los Padres will have decreased percent grade only 2.5%, allowing for maximum train speeds of 220 miles per hour. Thus, it will take the HSR only about 7 minutes to travel under the Los Padres from Lockwood Valley Road to Casitas Springs. Because the train will travel under the forest, it will have no effect on the natural ecosystem above the ground. The tunnels can be bored under a direct line of canyons running north to south, not under ridges and summits. This means shallower tunnels that enable construction of escape routes at reasonable depth along its entirety. The biggest difference and advantage of this route is the geology. The Los Padres consist of Monterey shale, marine sandstone, chalk, limestone, pebbly conglomerate, and sedimentary rock. This makeup is much more suitable for boring tunnels. Through the shattered granite and fault zones of the Tehachapi San Gabriels, the boring rate is only 10 to 20 feet per day versus the boring rate of 100 to 200 feet per day through the sedimentary Los Padres. This represents a tenfold reduction in the time to bore the tunnel, not to mention that the southwest route requires 1/2 the number of tunnel miles, as few as 1/10 the number of actual tunnels, the result being greatly reduced construction costs and decreased construction time. To build the tunnel running the entire 17 to 20 mile length under the Los Padres is very doable, considering the Gotthard base tunnel was completed in Switzerland last year at a length of 35 miles.
Mr. Follett, thank you. You've given us a very cogent document here, and I just want to make sure everybody has about an equal amount of time. Can we just take this, please, and your comments will be included in the record. And I know nothing about this, but appreciate you bringing this possibility to our attention. So,
thank you, Chairman Richard.
Thank you very much, sir. And then now, Joe Adams.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give you a little personal background and thoughts, and hope you bear with me real quickly, but I am the director, president, CEO, and all-around handyman at 10322 Mary Bell Avenue in Shadow Hills. I've been there for 25 years and lived in these communities of Sutherland, Tujunga, and Shadow Hills for just about 60. I'd like to know if anyone here, by raise of hands, knows where Mount Gleason Junior High is. Well, I graduated there, and I was in Mr. Ryan's drafting class when it was announced that President Kennedy was assassinated. At Verdugo Hills High School, anyone know where that is? Have you ever been there? Well, it looks like maybe our communities aren't really being that well represented in that respect, but that's a fond part of my past. We know that I even received a corsage for my high school prom from the florist shop on McVine and Foothill by Mrs. Hildegard Hillman, who I'll never forget. These are fond memories. We also have, we're subject to, as many areas are, natural disasters. Sylmar earthquake, my sister wanted on February 9th to have something different, and she got her wish. Northridge 94 earthquake. Big Tahunga flood was, I think, around 1962, in which people were isolated due to a washout of roads. Past fires, too. Recently, the Creek fire, Latuna fire almost had our family evacuated. We were packed, ready to go, but we were spared. Then came the Creek fire. We were packed and we left. We had to go, obviously. We've heard the statement that costs have increased 83%. We've had mention of other cost overrides. I just want to bring that to home. If you were to go to a car lot and you wanted to pick out a particular car, you had agreed at a price, and then by the time when it came to signing on the bottom line and it had been 3, 5, 10 times more, that would make sense. I can't imagine billions, but I can imagine these things, and that's how we're being affected. And I would just hope that you reconsider this, because I don't believe that the current plans are the best plan for the Northeast San Fernando Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. I'd like to thank all the citizens who came to speak this morning. And with that, the second public comment period is closed. I don't think we have any other items of business. And members, we have the closed session memo from the General Counsel, but I don't feel the need for a discussion of that unless other members would disagree. So with that, we'll thank everybody, and this meeting of the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board is adjourned. Thank you.